Hello my amazing people, and welcome back to my channel. If you're back, if you are new, welcome to my channel. I'm Shayna and I'll be diving into another case for you today. Just my usual disclaimer, this is all information that I have found online that I've compiled into a video for educational and entertainment purposes. This case was recommended to me by one of my subscribers. I believe her name is Deja. If I'm pronouncing her name wrong, please forgive me, but she recommended this case to me over on Instagram, and I looked into it and I just knew that I had to cover it. It's about a young African-American man who lost his life in a set of strange circumstances, and technically the case is solved, but there are so many questions, way more questions than answers. So I really wanted to bring this story to you today. Most of you will let me know that you prefer to hear cases that haven't been heavily covered, and this is one of those. And another thing that I want to tell you about before I actually start the video is that there is a petition that I'm going to recommend that everybody sign who is watching this video. I'll talk about it more at the end, but I know not everybody makes it to the end, which is totally fine. But that petition, the link to it will be in the description box below. If you don't do anything else, please, I insist that you go sign this petition. It is totally free and it helps the family get this case reopened. So just want to put that in there as well in case you don't make it to the end. But without further ado, thank you so much for joining me today, and let's get started. Brandon James Mitchner was born on May 27th, 1992 in Lansing, Michigan to his parents Stephen and Shirley Mitchner. A lot of people in his life called him by the nickname Brandino, and everybody really loved him because he had an incredible sense of humor. He was one of those people who was always making everybody laugh, and that was from when he was a little boy. He was like that, and people loved being around him because of his lighthearted nature and his great sense of humor. Brandon was really smart as a kid, and one of his hobbies was actually riding horses, and he was described to have an old soul. Like, he was an old man in a young man's body, which was kind of cool because he was just this cool, wise, funny, and very smart person. And he really liked basketball. That was his favorite sport. He actually played basketball through elementary school, through middle school, but then when it came time to try out for the high school basketball team, Brandon was so bummed because he didn't make it because he was too short. But he did stay in really great shape. Working out was a hobby that basically he just fell into because he wasn't working out to practice for basketball. But not only did he like working out, he also really liked to dance. And his dance moves were really funny. They would make everybody crack up laughing anytime he would dance at home or with his friends. And it was always a good time with Brandon. Brandon had a really big family with 3 sisters and 2 brothers, and in large part he was like the life of the household. Like I told you, he was just a funny kid and a funny guy, so he brought that spunk to the house, which was really cool. And he was closest to, of course, his parents. He had a really close relationship with his parents, but also with one of his sisters, especially his sister Brianna. He was really tight with. They had an awesome brother-sister relationship. Not only that, awesome family, but he also had a dog named Bruno that he was close to for a really long time, and as far as I know, Bruno is still here and with his mother. Brandon went to Grand Ledge High School and graduated from there in 2010. Shortly thereafter, he did earn an associate's degree, but he really was passionate about fashion design and he wanted to be a successful designer. So he started his own clothing line, and it was the acronym MIYM, which stood for Make It Your Mission. And the philosophy of this company was basically a brand that was there to spread positivity, to spread cheer, and that's what he was passionate about. So he made a clothing line. They specialize in t-shirts, and he was really excited about this and really had big plans. Like, in his future, he saw himself being an extremely successful fashion designer, which was really cool for his family to witness him dive headfirst into this hobby, so to speak, but a way for him to also earn money. And he had a business partner that he worked with on his company, but he was the main brains behind the brand. It was his idea and it was his execution with just the help of a business partner. On June 28th, 2014, 22-year-old Brandon was debating about if he wanted to go to his friend's 21st birthday party. And he didn't really know if he wanted to go because he was friends with the birthday boy, but he wasn't really friends with the rest of the group except for his business partner, who wasn't really his friend, but just someone that he worked with. And since he wasn't real tight with everyone that was attending this birthday party, this birthday bash, he wasn't too thrilled about going. But his girlfriend actually convinced him to just go out and try to have a good time. And finally he agreed, and the whole plan was that the group of guys were going to get on this party bus. They were going to go into downtown Lansing, and they were going to bar hop and basically drink and have a good time. So Brandon goes out with the group, and he doesn't return home at a time that's normal for him. Like Shirley, his mother, always expected that he was home at a reasonable time, at least a little bit before the bars closed or right afterwards. But when he didn't come home, she just figured, let me try not to worry. He's most likely out just having a good time. He's a young man, he's responsible. I'm not gonna blow up his phone. It's not in his character not to call me to check in, but I'm just gonna let him enjoy his night. And she went to bed. Stephen and Shirley woke up the next morning and went to the airport to board a flight to Florida, where they were going to celebrate their wedding anniversary. And at this point, Brandon still was not home, but the two of them just figured maybe he fell asleep on the party bus, or maybe he crashed at a friend's house. They were trying not to stress about it. They were planning on enjoying their vacation. So they boarded this plane, got down to Florida, and were planning on having a good time for their anniversary. Shortly after arriving in Florida, Stephen and Shirley received a phone call from their daughter Bianca, who told them that she believed that Brandon had been missing. He hadn't come back to the house, and she was receiving messages on Facebook and seeing people posting on Facebook that Brandon had been missing and nobody knew where he was. So of course, Stephen and Shirley just canceled the rest of their vacation. They pack up and they board a flight the very next morning to come back home and try to figure out why Brandon still had not returned home yet. The morning after Brandon had gone out, one of the guys who was with Brandon the night before, let's call him Steve, because his name is actually left out of this case. And when I was doing research, I couldn't figure out who exactly he was. So Steve posted on Facebook the very next day that he was the last person who was with Brandon the night before, and that Brandon had fallen into Grand River, which was a few miles away from where the bars were that they went to. The police, of course, got involved. They called Steve in for questioning, and he didn't actually formally notify police that Brandon had fallen into the river or was in the river or that he was missing until 12 whole hours after he had fallen into the Grand River. Steve told police that around 7 p.m. the whole group got together on the party bus and went downtown, and they were drinking copious amounts of alcohol. They were throwing back shots. They were really drinking a lot for this birthday celebration. And at some point, Brandon got tired and he felt sick because he had drank so much, and he just really wanted to go home. So Steve decided that, this is what he told police, he decided that he was going to walk Brandon back to the party bus just to make sure he didn't try to drive home or that he didn't get caught up in anything unsafe. Steve tells police that Brandon walked to the party bus, was on there for a few minutes, and then got back off and began walking in the direction of the river, and that he was just following Brandon to make sure that he was okay. According to Steve, Brandon kept walking and walking and walking and walking, and finally he started running and went into this heavily wooded area. And Steve said that he stopped chasing him at this point, and he just let him go, and he heard a splash, thinking that maybe, okay, Brandon maybe just fell into the water, but he didn't know. And he was saying that he was so drunk and everything was such a blur, so he was trying to piece together the memories of what had happened that night, but he wasn't 100% sure. But he said that he did remember that he called his friends and told his friends that Brandon went into the river and he couldn't find him. And the friends apparently tried to find Brandon's location. They tried to find Steve's location so that they could come to them and try to help, but they apparently couldn't find their location, just gave up, and Steve got in a taxi and went home. The next morning, when the friend group woke up and realized that Brandon was not with them, they all started posting on Facebook and frantically looking for him and trying to figure out where he was, but he was not answering his phone. So Steve takes police to where he last saw Brandon, and they begin searching this area. And what they notice is a few different things. There is like slide marks on the hill from the trees to the river, as if someone maybe had fallen and slid down or rolled down, and there was broken branches. It looked like maybe there was a struggle that happened right on the river's edge, and they're trying to figure out, okay, did this all just happen because he fell? Like, did something more happen here? Was there a fight? And they tried to track Brandon's phone to see if maybe it was somewhere near the river too, or if he had taken it and just hadn't contacted anyone at this point. But like I told you, his phone was off, so they weren't having any luck with this. So they kept making their way down the river. They actually ordered for a diving team to come in to also search in the river just in case. And they weren't feeling too good about things when they found a black and blue hat that matched the hat that Brandon was wearing the night that he went out with the friend group. And they also found a Jordan sneaker that looked like one that belonged to him as well. Around 1 p.m. on June 29th, the dive team did retrieve a body from the Grand River that was later identified to be that of Brandon Mitchner. He had bruises all over his body in a really suspicious manner, and his family was devastated. The whole community was devastated, but this family was so grief-stricken, especially Shirley, his mother. She was just totally broken when she found out about her son's death. And she said that she was unable to leave her room. She just didn't want to do anything but lay in the bed and mourn and just think about what had happened to her son. So Stephen, Brandon's father, actually handled all of his funeral arrangements and all of the dealings with the investigation and all of that stuff after his passing. And on Saturday, July 5th, family and friends gathered for a beautiful service in Brandon's memory, and they said their last goodbyes, talked about the impact that he made on all of their lives, and talked about his laughter and his lighthearted personality and his funny dance moves, and just really tried to mourn but also celebrate the life of Brandon Mitchner. The situation stirred up emotion in so many people in the entire community. It wasn't just his family. Like the community was hit hard by this, and the circumstances were just so weird. Things can happen when you're intoxicated, but to this level, it seems odd, right? And Shirley felt this pit in her stomach that something wasn't right, that this wasn't an accident. She felt like someone did this to her son, that they put him in the river or pushed him in the river or held him in the river, that there was some sort of foul play involved that caused Brandon's passing. Police continue to look into the case and are able to get their hands on surveillance footage in the neighborhood that Brandon and Steve were walking through right before all of this happened. And the way that Steve explained it was that he was chasing after Brandon, that he was walking after him just to make sure nothing happened. But they were walking right next to each other, and then Brandon kind of slowly made his way in front of Steve, but he wasn't running on the camera. He was walking. He may have looked a little intoxicated. And Steve and Brandon walked past the camera, and just seconds later, Steve walks back by himself, Brandon not by his side. This camera surveillance was picked up like feet away from the river, right there. So Steve saw something because he ran away from the scene. He wasn't on his phone trying to frantically call someone. He was running as if he had done something or as if he didn't want to get caught for something. This wasn't the reaction of a comrade or a constituent who saw someone fall and possibly hurt themselves and who wanted to help this person. If someone falls in a river and they could possibly drown, running away is probably not going to be your first reaction if you really want to help them, right? Now, again, Steve said that they were all so intoxicated that everything was a blur and he just really didn't know what was going on. And while that may be partially true, he had enough sense to call someone and tell them that Brandon was missing. So for him to then get in a taxi and go home as opposed to going back to see if maybe Brandon made it to the shore and was okay, or maybe calling police to see if someone could send an ambulance or a rescue team or something. He knew what happened because he remembered it the next day. So he wasn't blackout drunk at this point because he remembers all this happening because he reported it to police and he posted it on Facebook. So if he had, again, enough sense to be cognizant of all of this, then he had enough sense to call and report it, or to just drunkenly jump in the river after Brandon to try to help him, in my opinion. Another friend of Brandon's came forward and told investigators that Steve and Brandon, who were again business partners in this brand that Brandon launched, were having disagreements about the company recently. They weren't getting along in the same way that they were before, and it was because Brandon truly felt like Steve wasn't pulling his weight with the company. He wasn't doing as much as he could, and therefore their profits were suffering because of it. Like, he felt like Steve wasn't being an equal business partner, and they were experiencing disagreements and having arguments about this pretty frequently. And this presents itself as a possible motive or just a reason behind why maybe Steve, in a fit of rage, could have possibly pushed Brandon into the river, or why he didn't feel like he wanted to help Brandon get out of the river after he saw him fall. Another weird thing is that Steve let Brandon walk 3 miles. This wooded area in the river was miles away from where they were all bar hopping. This wasn't a block away. This wasn't down the street. 3 miles is a long way to go for Steve to not say, "Hey Brandon, let's turn around." And my mind goes to coercion. Was this Steve's attempt to get Brandon isolated so that he could do something to him? Because what reason would justify allowing your drunk friend to walk 3 miles and then to let them continue walking into woods and then falling into a river? It doesn't make much sense, does it? And not only this, but why would Brandon just walk willy-nilly into the trees? He most likely wouldn't. On the footage, you can see him walking down the sidewalk. He's not stumbling through the streets and rolling around. Like, he's not to the point of being drunk that he is just totally unaware of himself. He wouldn't just walk into the trees. Like, he wouldn't just leave the sidewalk and continue to walk into the woods. It doesn't add up. Those two things together make me feel that weird feeling where you're like, that doesn't make sense. Ultimately, the coroner ruled Brandon's death an accident and justified the bruises on his body by saying that they were caused by him falling or possibly rolling into a boat that was on the side of the river and bruising his body that way. His blood alcohol indicated that he had 7 or 8 drinks in his body prior to walking and falling in the river, and police used this as a way of justifying that this was just an unfortunate accident that happened to him. The case was handed over from local police to state police, who ultimately investigated and came to the same exact conclusion that this was a horrible accident and that there was no or not enough evidence to arrest or accuse Steve of any foul play or of doing this to Brandon. There just wasn't sufficient evidence according to the police. And Shirley especially, obviously, of course, all of Brandon's family, but Shirley especially was infuriated by this because it just seemed like the police wanted to open it and shut it. Like, if there wasn't a glaring piece of evidence thrown at them, they just wanted to give up and say this was a horrible accident. That's the way Shirley felt. And she actually not only felt like the police weren't doing their job, but she also was very disappointed that Steve wasn't held accountable for anything. Not just because he wasn't held accountable for actually doing this to Brandon, but for the simple fact that he didn't even report it to police or try to help Brandon when it happened. That's what really, really infuriated Shirley. And she took her frustration and she tried to turn it into good. And she's been working really hard to get a law passed in the state that says that you have a duty to act. That's what it's called, a duty to act law, where you have a responsibility if someone is in danger to either report it or to try to help them and report it. Like, you can't just witness something and say, oh, it's not involving me, so I'm just gonna mind my business, which a lot of people do that. But in a case like this, a law that would require you to report something would have possibly saved Brandon's life. So Shirley has been working tirelessly to get this law passed in remembrance of Brandon, but to help and potentially save other victims or other people who really may need help in the moment where someone else or an onlooker or a bystander is afraid or unwilling to speak up. The street leading up to the wooded area in the river where Brandon fell in was actually pretty secure with guardrails for the most part, but where Brandon walked in there were no guardrails. So there was no physical barrier to be like, hey, maybe we should stop here. And Shirley also has been working really hard to get guardrails put up in this area, also to get signs put up just to notify people who may be walking by that this is not the safest area to walk. There's a risk of slipping and falling, and there's a river right here. So she was able to do that. There was a new guardrail installed right around where Brandon fell, as well as signs indicating to people just to be cautious and to use caution in this area. Shirley, who in my humble opinion is a Wonder Woman, because she has been working non-stop from the time that this happened to keep Brandon's name in remembrance, but also to make a real change from what happened to Brandon. So with that being said, the petition that I told you about in the beginning of this video can be found on change.org. It can be found in the description of this video. If you do nothing else today, please go and sign this petition. It currently only has 2,800 signatures. It should have so many more, so please go and sign this petition. It's totally free. You can sign it anonymously if you want to. And I'm hopeful that it can really make a big difference and potentially get Brandon's case reopened, re-examined, and looked into again, just so that they can go over all the facts a little bit in closer detail and potentially find a different outcome for Brandon. Shirley, again, Wonder Woman, Wonder Mom, has also restarted Brandon's clothing line, which you can go online and shop right now. You can find it at miym.shop. It's a cool website where you can look at different items that they have for sale there, different collections, and she kept Brandon's slogan, "Make it your mission," and she added to the company a logo, which is the lion. That was her aspect of it. So in some ways, it's a company that both she and her son are doing, which is a really beautiful thing because it's in Brandon's memory and it's something that he would have wanted to be successful. Like I told you, he had really big dreams for this company. So her continuing to build it is in large part in honor of her son. The family is offering a $5,000 cash reward to anyone who can offer any information that may lead to reopening this investigation and solving it and bringing justice for Brandon. Not only this, you can also contact the Lansing Police Department at 517-483-4600 with any information that you may have. Brandon's life was cut really short, and I understand why his family feels like there is not enough closure here. Like there just needs to be a little bit more done, a lot more done. There needs to be more time spent on this case. They need to put energy and effort into it and put the same amount of effort that they would put in other cases. The fact of the matter is that Black and brown people, especially young Black men, do not receive the justice that they deserve, that they don't get the same attention to detail in their cases as other people do. And the least we can do for the family is sign the petition and contribute in some small way to potentially getting this case reopened and finding justice for Brandon. All of the kids who were there that night, or the young men who were there that night, have moved on. They have families now. They are living their lives, and Brandon isn't here anymore. And we want to be able to give him a voice in any way that we can. I was really inspired when I found this one because Brandon had a beautiful mission for himself in his life. He really wanted just to spread positivity, spread light, make people happy, and I thought that was incredible. But also because Black and brown people don't have their stories shared enough. And it's not my opinion, it's a fact. When you hear about true crime stories, you're hearing probably 80% about stories that happen to non-people of color. And it's not because these tragedies aren't happening, it's because the tragedies aren't being covered. But I just wanted to let you know why I chose to cover this case in particular. I have been receiving a ton of recommendations in my DMs on Instagram. Please feel free to slide into my DMs with recommendations. I am always looking for a new case to cover, for someone's story that I can tell and bring to you all. So please go over there. My Instagram name is sunnyshade.v. That is where I create my list of case recommendations to choose from. And again, I've gotten a ton, so thank you to everyone who has already reached out. And thank you, if you made it this far, you know what I'm going to say. If you made it this far, you are loyal. You really are, and I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful morning or afternoon or evening, depending on what time it is when you watch this video. Make sure you go sign that petition. Make sure you let me know what case recommendations that you have, and make sure you share this video so that other people can sign the petition and that we can get this ball rolling for the family and get Brandon's case reopened sooner than later. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you have an awesome week, and I'll see you next week. Peace.